Okay, we've got Bill Heiser here from Soliant, who's going to be um, presenting our speaker, who is one of his coworkers there. Bill has been speaking to us for many years. He used to be the guy who would bring us the new versions of FileMaker every year. So anyway, it's good to see you again, Bill.
Yeah,
And
thanks for the invite.
thanks for coming.
Always good to break away from the norm, do something a little different. So I appreciate you inviting us. Today I brought with me Mike Duncan. He's one of our senior cloud engineers. He's going to be doing the bulk of the presentation today. Trust me, he's a lot smarter guy than I am, and yeah, I think you'll really enjoy it. So first off, we're going to get into a little bit of a kind of a subtopic to hosting, if you will. About 3 or 4 years ago, I guess it's been a little longer than that now, we started off into kind of a different direction here at Soliant when I came on board. And one of the areas we wanted to kind of focus in is kind of fixing a number of things that I had just dealt with over my 25 plus years of working with FileMaker and being an engineer at FileMaker for a number of years. And I really wanted to create something that I could stand on a platform. In my world, it's always kind of come down to sort of the triangle of things. It's how good is your solution? How well is it architected? What kind of environment does it operate in? The infrastructure that supports it, and then the configurations of those things. We always can handle one of them, and a lot of the other two are kind of out of our hands a lot of the times. And one of the things that became very clear to me was, this cloud implementation offered up an opportunity to do some just incredibly different, amazing things with the infrastructure to support it up, utilizing different technologies to make very consistent, very clean, very reliable, and shore up some of the shortcomings that we've all seen in the product over the years. And sort of kind of take people like Wim Decor and Mike Duncan and myself and our years of things we've been through, and we put together what we call Soliant.cloud, which is our MSP hosting service. And over the past 2.5 years, we've really built that thing up. We're now well over 200 plus different implementations. We have multiple FBAs signed on partners with us. We just got our AWS advanced tier partnership passed through. So we're one of 12 SMBs in the entire country now. We have over 17 certified individuals on board in AWS and 3 professionals and I don't know, something like 9 or 10, I think now, associates. CloudFormation's delivery, we've done a lot of work with integrations, multiple different APIs and a lot of different services. And we're about ready to kick off a whole new thing with AWS and our SMB partnership and the Cloud Initiative program. So if you'd be happy enough to post that for me, I'll send you a link to it, Jonathan, and maybe you guys might be interested in some of what we're doing in the CloudFormations area. Bottom line today, though, we're going to look at a very sort of a narrow focus of the massive amount of services available in AWS. One of the things that we've kind of found out is having control over the backend infrastructure allows us to tie directly in with those services in a way that's just not possible if you don't have that direct integration capability through roles and policies and rights, and having machine do things for you. Someone mentioned AI earlier, machine learning, IoT gets enabled, big data lakes. There's just so many possibilities in this massive universe. And we've kind of put our foot down in AWS, and it's been a real interesting ride for me. I'm currently director of the AWS practice, and Mike is one of our senior cloud engineers. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to go through one of our implementations in the S3 world. This is basically Amazon's implementation of big data. It is a massive structure that we can store all types of object storage database in. It is very different than EBS, which is essentially block storage, which is what you're all used to typically using, some form of SSD or HDD or something like that. This is a block storage, petabyte scale in size, and offers a really great way to do massive amounts of different functionality, as well as reduce cost of storage of specifically container data. Container data can get a little unwieldy sometimes. I'm sure some of you have gotten into some projects where you've just got these large amounts, especially when you want to stream it, share it, get to it, modify, versionize. There's a lot of things that a service like AWS S3 can do for you. So I'll stop talking and let you guys enjoy yourself. And I'll step back in for some questions towards the end. But Mike, it is all yours, brother.
Thank you. Can everybody see my screen? Good?
Yes.
Yes, like Bill said, the topic here is storing container data in the cloud with AWS S3 specifically. Jump right in. So just the basic concept, we all kind of know what the deal is with FileMaker and external container data. It was a massive improvement having the external container data over just the container data stored within a file. So it's kind of a no-brainer just to turn that on. But there are some big, considerations using that. And we see some of that in our hosting. We've got clients that, have just massive amounts of data. And if they were all still in the file, it'd be a huge problem, but at least it's external, right? So it's the storage of those binary files, which individually can be large and altogether can be just massive, right? The easy use is a big consideration, the way container fields work in FileMaker. But backups can be a big problem, and it should be a big consideration when you're planning your disaster recovery strategy, right? Discussing this back and forth, atomicity is a big consideration. That's one of its big pluses, right? Because it keeps the transactions atomic within FileMaker. But there's we'll go into that a little bit more. And then of course, like performance and cost, and you can even get into bandwidth usage in the data API. It doesn't necessarily count against it, but there are some caveats using that. And then whether you require plugins, if you're looking at options, handling your container data some other way. And what we'll be showing here, we actually don't require any plugins. This is all just FileMaker scripting, pretty much using the curl functions. And then when we're moving to the cloud, we're thinking of those API integrations and how easy that is to use, not just in terms of development, but how easy it is for the end user. Features and compliance security, handling security credentials, how you do that, how available is it? That is a consideration. It may not be good for offline usage. So definitely some of the things that we're showing here, we're not trying to show lists as, this is the one way to do things. This is just an option. So it's, we think it's a pretty good option that fits a lot, especially if you're dealing with a lot of external data. I want to talk about the concept of decoupling your application. This comes up a lot in cloud architected or cloud native applications. And the question is, should you decouple your application? It may not make sense to a lot of databases, but if you think of it less of a database and more of an application, the more it grows, the more sense it makes to have these different processes kind of working in concert, and that allows you to scale up and have these different processes attack these different processes kind of in concert. It decreases the bandwidth and processing required from the Draco engine. So if all your container data is stored in FileMaker, that's got to be processed and served up by that engine as well. Whereas if you have some other API integration, like we're going to show, that's not necessarily all traveling, have to traverse through that data engine and processed by the FileMaker server if you've got a hosted application. And then of course that makes it more scalable, and there's different strategies for backups. And it massively reduces the size of your database, right? You don't have to worry about that. Even that, if you count we think of the external container data, you're not even storing that. You're just referencing that from your database. I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I did want to bring up the ACID versus base consistency models. As FileMaker developers, we may even take this for granted or not even know the difference, but FileMaker kind of follows this ACID model, right, where it's atomic, consistent, isolated, and durable. So if if you think of the concept of completing transactions versus the base model, which kind of loosely stands for basically available, soft state, and eventually consistent. You might be thinking like, well, why would I care? What's the difference? What's the advantage of using one versus the other? S3 kind of follows more of the base model. So it's just a matter of like being aware, knowing the different systems that you're integrating with. But the big takeaway here is that this base model is massively scalable. It's more what's used in some of these larger platforms and how they can scale out to millions of users. Just to change topic a little bit here, talking about security. IAM in AWS stands for Identity Access Management. And some best practices following along with that is this principle of, I say least privilege, that should be least privilege, right? So the idea is that you configure your credentials to only allow intended functionality for what the person is to be able to do, right? That's not a foreign concept to FileMaker, right? You go and configure your security privileges based on that, but there's a different way of doing that in AWS that kind of extends the same concept. Those credentials are going to allow you to do what you need to do, just extending it beyond your FileMaker application. And I always like to bring up this well-architected framework. I think these are good regardless of what kind of application you're building. The ideas of these like 5 pillars that it's built on of reliability or durability, operational excellence, security, performance efficiency, and cost optimization. And there's actually white papers that are really good based on each of these. They're good to follow up on. They're just good fundamentals to drive home no matter what kind of application you're building. So what is S3? So the S3 stands for Simple Storage Service, right? That's the 3 S's, right? And the big takeaway is it's object storage, not block. If you think of block storage, you think of like a hard drive volume or something suitable that your operating system can connect to and store files on and stuff. Whereas object storage, you can kind of think of it as a big, massive database. And it's more or less like, if you think of like a key value pair, where the key is the name of the file and the value is the data stored in that object. So this was one of the earliest services that AWS came out with. It wasn't the first, but it was one of the first, and they built onto it. They just keep adding features and adding reliability and adding regions around the world that they support. It's think of it as like a big data store that's almost infinitely scalable, and there's different pricing tiers that you can apply and take advantage of depending on your needs. There's also it supports encryption at rest, and that I think the regional placement consideration is a big factor when you consider AWS and some other services that you can like place it in a region that's most convenient to where you or your clients are located. And then of course the cost consideration, which we'll dive into that a little bit later, but there are massive cost improvements versus block storage when you consider object storage. Right, and then the bandwidth is in AWS, it's always download only. So uploading data to AWS is always free. You only get hit when you download the fragment. And then I mentioned the different features that they keep adding. Just a couple things that we can take advantage of in S3 is we can enable object versioning. So it would automatically keep a brand new version every time you uploaded, if you wanted that functionality, and then be able to go back and get to prior versions of a particular object. Pre-signed URLs, which are really nice. That gives you the ability to create a URL that then you can then share and set a specific expiration date on. And the credentials, they're not embedded in the URL. You use your security credentials to be able to generate like a really long URL that then you can share. We can enable lifecycle rules on either an object or an entire bucket, and say we want to change the storage tier or how much it costs based on the length of time that an object exists. So, for 30 days, when we're most likely to look at something, we can, have it at a standard tier and then switch it to a tier that costs less, and maybe even we delete it after, if we don't need an object after a year, we can have it automatically expire and delete. We also have the ability to assign like object lock for, say, for if you're maybe a law firm that has some kind of compliance rules where they need to keep items around for a certain amount of time. So that can prevent some accidental deletion. We can enable things like that on different objects or on an entire bucket. And then, of course, it's nice we can leverage different AWS services. And once we've got things stored up there in AWS, then it becomes easier to use different AWS services to use those objects that are up there. And we've got some demonstration of that. But one concept too is just the introduction of this concept of a data lake, where they've got different services like Glue or Athena that will either crawl or just hit that data. Say you've got data stored in JSON or CSV format, right? And it can walk that data and make it available to you. So I want to just talk about an example use case here, where, and then when I get too out of control, but say we've got 1 terabyte of external data in FileMaker, and it's not totally unreasonable to have that amount of data, right? That's a lot of data, but then it really becomes a concern of, if we want to back up that data, and even with the hard linking in the data, we're talking about a minimum of, a 1 copy of that 1 terabyte, right? So that automatically means you need to have another volume at least with more than 1 terabyte, depending on how many different copies of your data that you want to keep. It's with the hard linking, it's at the very least dependent on the amount of data that's changed between those. So that's definitely going to affect how many backups you're able to keep, and the consideration for your disaster recovery strategy. And you talk about these concepts of RTO and RPO, where you've got, what's your minimum time of recovery that you've defined that you want to be able to, in case of disaster, be able to recover and have a backup based on your recovery point as well. So, how much data are you willing to lose, and what's the time that it takes you to get that back up? We're going to compare that with storing 1 terabyte in S3, where now it's decoupled from your solution and it's more scalable. And all data in S3 is redundant across all AZs, which stands for availability zones. And in AWS, that just means when we talk about a region, there's multiple data centers that make up a region. So typically it's at least 3. So, and that's part of that base model. When we upload an object to S3, it's going to be written to one of those, and then it's eventually going to be copied to every other availability zone in that particular region. There's other options too if we want to, extend that to, say, copy that data over to another region. But just the fact that in one region we've got very least like 3 different copies in a region. And then performance improvements. I think that taking that load off of the FileMaker server, off of the Draco engine, sending everything through, then we can utilize, say, like a web viewer that doesn't necessarily come through FileMaker, right? It's just loading in a web viewer. So if we look at how this breaks down in cost, is the typical scenario, right? And we're looking at the cost in AWS 3 for an EBS volume. So this is block storage, right? And we're going to have 1 terabyte on a 1.5 terabyte volume, and our backups we're going to have on a 2 terabyte volume, just for the sake of argument, right? So just in terms of the cost of that volume per month, you're looking at $350. So that cost, extended out over the year, it's $4,200. Let's compare that with the standard tier in S3, where we've got 1 terabyte. We don't need to provision, additional volume for any growth. You don't just pay for what it uses. You just take up the spaces as you go. And we don't necessarily need to, have a separate volume for backups. So the cost per month, just an estimate, is around 24 bucks. I extend it out to a year, and we get 282. Then I can't see my column here because I've got something in the way, but there is a thing called intelligent tier that you can turn on. It's kind of a no-brainer. Like if you want to get some cost improvement, it kind of scans like based on how frequently an object is accessed. So just to get some immediate, cost improvement over just the standard tier in S3, that's something that you can switch on. There are different tiers too that if you want more control and you want to get even more cost savings, but that's just something easy that you can turn on. I wanted to talk about some data migration. We recently had a client come to us with about 5 terabyte of data that they needed to upload. They had on premises on some file servers there. So we looked at this option of just to copy up that data. This particular client had a slow enough internet connection. It was going to take weeks for it to copy that up. So it was quicker for us to use these Snow family of products, and they come in a couple different flavors. And it's kind of cool. It's this little self-contained box that's like tamper resistant and secure and sturdy. And it just ships out over UPS. It goes directly to the client. You order it directly out through the AWS console, ships to the client. It gets to the client, and we had a person there on site, copied the files to it. It ships back to AWS, and then it imports from that little device. And we can match up based on the file name and the location of the bucket. All their data just shows up in their FileMaker application now. But now it's all sorted in S3. and they come in a couple different flavors. The one we needed was snow cone, because snow cone can support up to like 8 terabyte of data, and it's about the size of like a box Kleenex, and it's pretty cool. I took an image of this. This was after we copied all the files to it, and you click off, say you're done. The device actually has a little e-ink display, so the e-ink display just updates to the shipping information to ship back to AWS. You just drop it off at the UPS store and it ships back. It's pretty slick. There's some other like storage gateway option, and that might be for clients that have a lot more, or they still have stuff on-prem that they need faster access to, where they actually run a physical line out. And there's some different options there, whether you have like a one-time like push up, or want to like cache your S3 information locally on-prem. But there's some different options there. All right, and time for demo. So I put together this little demo. So the scenario here is we've got some FileMaker records with addresses. This is just sample data here. And it created like a UID, and that's going to be our like a folder name for us. And I've got several different images in here. These are just straight old FileMaker records, and what we're viewing over here, this is a web viewer. So when I click on a button here, it's going to generate that pre-signed URL and update our web viewer with that pre-signed URL. We're just displaying that in web viewer and viewing this from S3. So in terms of like bandwidth, it's really not any more than if we were viewing the container data in a FileMaker container field. You'd be looking at the exact same amount of bandwidth required to display that. And we're just getting it from two sources. We're getting the FileMaker application served up from FileMaker, and the image data served up in WebViewer from S3. So if we wanted to look at one of the nice things too is I've got a program to like browse that S3 data. So you can kind of see it here in different folders. And I've uploaded, and I can see those there. So say I want to upload a new image, and this is all just FileMaker work here, right? We're kind of familiar with. I want to drag and drop into, and this is actually a container field here, right? But I'm not going to store that in. This is just kind of temporary for our purposes here, right? I've got that here, and as soon as I hit upload image, it's going to upload that via an insert from URL using the AWS API, and just push it straight up, and then clear out because we don't need to store that. Get there, and then we can there. So once it's up there, part of this demo, there is a little bit of integration with there's a machine learning service called Recognition that kind of out of the box does a couple different things for us. And a couple of the things that it does will go out and it will look at extracting any text it sees in these images. And it'll also give me, there's a service for hitting that and getting some of the different labels. So if we were kind of generically getting different labels, but this, and it goes out and does this. This could all be automated too, like right when you upload the image. I just made it separate just to call it out. But then just to show you like some of the data we get back a big block of JSON. So it's pretty easy to walk through and populate, another table with data that we got back, and we got back, the text detection, right? This got detection, and then it also gives us a confidence level of how sure that the algorithm was that it got back that what it says it did. We can, use that, and if we were making decisions about text that we got back and how confident we are that it got the right thing back versus the label detection. It's things it's an electronic device. It might be an adapter. Not so sure about that. But we've also got edit this object. So we have some control over different storage classes. So if we wanted to, say, switch this to Glacier or infrequent access, I would say that you just want to be careful that when you're switching to, especially some of these real cheap tiers, that there are some other requirements. So you may learn out the hard way. Like if you switch to infrequent access, you need to at least store that object for a certain amount of time. Otherwise, that's subject to what's called early delete. So if you know that you're going to have that around, but I wouldn't store it at a cheaper tier and know that you're then going to delete that before, say, 30 or 60 days. We can turn on encryption at rest. Handle that all through the API. And then I've got our pre-signed URL. Here you can set an expiration, and it supports anything up to 1 week. You just specify that in the amount of seconds. Do that there, and I've got that where it'll copy it to your clipboard. So if you wanted to, share that with somebody, they'd be able to access that object for that amount of time. And then I've also got, as part of this demo, if I want to email this image as an HTML. So we're going to build a little there. Put in the HTML for our sample image. Right. If we look at the raw HTML, we could see it just created that image HTML element, and there's my pre-signed URL there. If I wanted to edit it, and this is kind of a nice way of interacting with some of the newer JavaScript functions in 19. And we can use a HTML editor and then send the email, and that's off. I did want to show just an example of say my policy that you can scope this down to they only want to allow this set of actions to happen on these set of resources. So if I wanted to only create credentials to allow for accessing S3 with a particular resource or particular bucket, this is one way to do it. Again, this isn't the only way to do it. There are some other ways to do it. Like if you have you utilize consolidated billing and you have control over different entire accounts, you can set these kind of policies on an entire account, and that may make it easier. But this is a way of and you don't necessarily have to know the JSON here. There is a visual editor to pick and choose, I want these actions to be allowed for, the certain resources. And then you either apply that to a role or a user to generate the credentials that are going to allow you to integrate it from your application. Email images, so that's what that looks like in email. Any questions? That's pretty much all I had here for my basic demo here.
Yeah, Mike's Beverly. I had a question on the type of container data. Is it limited to what FileMaker thinks is a container, or can other types of documents be put in there? For example, I have a veterinarian who does radiographs, and we can certainly get the the text value or the digital value of that, but sometimes he wants to have the real image stored, and we're running into it's not going to work well in FileMaker.
You can actually have any kind of binary data in an object that you want.
Yeah, another addition to that, Beverly, is it really is any type of binary object, like Mike said. But in addition to that, it can be a lot of different things. I mean, we have a couple of solutions that actually store JSON as part of an object, and you could put the two of them together. So in your particular case, you actually would have probably a series of radiographs, and then you would end up with probably a series of matching. You could be JSON, text files, whatever it may be. But the idea behind that would be able to give you the graphic itself. And I would imagine those are probably pretty good size in some cases. So
yeah,
you pick up three really big benefits. I was going to mention this, but I'll use this as an opportunity to bring it up. One of the big things is if you're storing large binary objects, like large graphic containers, we have a customer who's using it to stream like 8 GB movies, right? And your ability to reduce the overhead on the Draco engine to free it up to do other processes is basically 100% if you do it in a container object or in an externally contained object, or 0% if you do it in an external storage like that. So you have no overhead of moving, manipulating, streaming, reading disk through the Draco engine, all that. And then in addition, that other object, if you store the additional components with it as part of like a JSON object with that references it, you can have other crawlers as well as FileMaker go and retrieve that information and present that information for either a find or additional data on that object. Does that help a little bit?
absolutely. I mean, that's really kind of what I was looking for. Was radiographs going to obviously have other metadata to it, not just the actual graph. So
we find
that would be excellent.
Yeah, we find that all the time. We're in the middle of a project right now that I think is going to end up being a really good example for all of us. But it's a large media company that actually has archive footage of videos and audio from concerts going back into the 60s, right? And you can imagine these are things that are very large. Just to move one of those objects through the Draco engine is a massive, lift for it. I mean, processor use, disk IO goes. You remove that entirely to where you end up taking a situation where I can do a find in a particular, let's say a month or like a year. I can scan the JSON objects, get all that back in an array. Then of that, give the person like hints in a little pop-up window, like, oh, these are things that kind of match that criteria based on that object storage that's there, that got there because it did image recognition or it did a text recognition of what it sees in those things. And then you pull those things up, and then the user can preview a small version of it because you can create different versions of those and store them. And then then when they go to deliver it to somebody, like a lot of times a client will need to preview it. They no longer have to move these things and set up these links and set up a share. You use this pre-signed URL derived from 0 processing power. It's a secure way to give it to them for say a week at a time. And then, you can share that data externally without really having to rely on the Draco engine to do any of that heavy lifting for you. So it kind of does all come together when you get it into an object store that can do these things for us.
Very cool. Thank you.
So I have a question, if I may. I'm looking at this and I'm conceptualizing it by comparing it to kind of the old school, call it classic, what FileMaker could do with container fields. So this looks to me to be a web viewer on a layout, right? And so the image, is that not a web viewer?
That's right. This is a web viewer. Yeah.
Okay. So multi-page PDF, by way of an example, we know classically you can store, images, JPEGs, and single page PDF shows up just as well. But I'm wondering, what else can you visualize due to the fact that you're using a web viewer technology that you couldn't do in a container? I mean, does it make multi-page PDFs better? Could it render a Word document as text, or so forth and so on?
I'll take that one because I'll talk about a specific use case for you. So we have a client, PCO, Pennsylvania Certified Organic, and they do organic verification for farmers all across the United States. One of the things that they needed to be able to do was to not only view multi-page PDFs, but they also have this certification program where farmers and different laboratories will submit test data, and they come in and it's kind of a proprietary tool that they use to view the thing, but they do offer a browser plugin for that. And they also offer a local client for that. So imagine, if you will, you have something, I know airlines have some different things for flight navigation, some other things. Using this methodology, you could use the web viewer, and that's fine if it's for basic level stuff. But you can also just pass that. Most of those applications will allow you to pass it a URL, and then you can use the core application or the browser plugin or whatever it may be to view it in its source. So the specific example would be using this kind of similar to Beverly's example, where you're using this to look at these radiographs. Imagine, if you will, this utility allows them to kind of flip and turn it and push the thing into 3D. You just pass that object URL to that, launch the local application or the browser viewer, and you can view anything in there. So use the browser plugin when it makes sense, or the web viewer when it makes sense, and just make a call to the other application. Because remember, you don't have to get it out of the FileMaker storage space. You're just referencing it, and that URL, at a best case scenario, the application can reference it. Worst case scenario is you pull it, open it up temporarily, and pass that variable to the local application and use it in its native technology. Does that help, Tony?
Yeah, I was going to show that too, that you wouldn't necessarily have to use a web viewer. You could use an actual container field, whether it's a global container field or whether you're just pulling it in temporarily and clearing it later. But this is just another layout, just kind of a more like kind of a utilitarian. Say I wanted just I've got, this is the object that I uploaded, right? So this one here, this PNG. So if I wanted to pull that down, so I can get object, and it actually pulls it into this is a container field. Since I don't want to store that in FileMaker, I don't want to take enough space, I didn't have to.
And let me jump back in and say, you guys are providing a lot of really interesting examples. And I'm looking at this in part. Way back, there was a program, Canto Cumulus, and a couple of competitors, but one of the things that Canto Cumulus offered that went beyond FileMaker alone for digital asset management was the ability, they had different filters for different file types. So going way back, you could view a freehand document. You could view an Adobe Illustrator document. Now we know, classically speaking, you can't, your FileMaker can view, images and PDFs and a few other things. It can store Word documents and Excel documents, but all you see is the icon. It does seem to me that the web viewer technology that you're leveraging in, with a AWS backend and the ability to render back something, would potentially give you the ability to replicate the functionality that Canto Cumulus and Excelsis gave you to view file types that go beyond what the container structure provides. So that's, I guess, my question. And I think, everything you're showing, the metadata processing, is very, very interesting. And I'm just kind of exploring the scope of what's offered here because it seems pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean,
and this web viewer, this web viewer here, it's not really doing too much special. It's just loading that pre-signed URL. But if we wanted to use that, say, with some other, JavaScript, integration that, kind of in between. So you've got some kind of special type that you've got a JavaScript library that handles, manipulating or storing that object, then, that could be put in the mix too and just use their web viewer.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
I had a couple of things that came up, Mike, in the chat. If we want to cover those, I'll walk through those and we can comment on them if that's a good time to do that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, so-
I wanted to hear the answer to Tony's question in the chat as well.
Yeah, so we'll take that one first. So I'm going to read it for everybody so you don't have to review to it. Tony says, my understanding is that the hard linking feature is scoped to the volume and FileMaker schedule. If you copy a folder of hard linked data to another volume, the copy will be the entire structure. If this is true, how do we optimize backups? For example, we're managing 400,000 digital assets, only a few changes of how we manage backups. Do AWS copies maintain hard link structure? The short answer to this is you can literally take everything that you know about FileMaker's internal backup strategy and you can just set it to the side. In my years at FileMaker, one of the things that I fought for so long, it was never successful, is to get out of this methodology of this hard linking thing. And it falls on its face at some levels. And I think AWS addresses this significantly. I'm going to explain to you how AWS manages backups and why we structure it the way we do to hopefully answer that question more directly. So with AWS, we are literally dropping those objects into, this S3 bucket. At that point in time, our backup is over because that backup is redundantly held at 9/11 worth of reliability. I can guarantee you that you're nowhere near that in storing it even in a hard linked local backup, and it's basically just real in time. But as it happens, it backs it up, maintains that. Another thing to keep in mind is that if you are doing it locally and you run that backup, Tony mentions about the hard linking. So when you hard link, you get the first pass, you get the entire structure. And from the next pass, when it runs, you do not get the entire structure, but you get a bitmap of what the differences are. So that when you go to restore, you combine all the deltas and the bitmaps with the master, which is recovered every so often, and you restructure those to restore the file. Thus, if you need to move that object of 400,000, or in our case, we have somebody with 7.5 terabytes of data, you would have to take and move that from one disk platter or one SSD over to another one. And yes, you can get some high-level, high-speed disk IOs, but we're talking about 7.5 terabytes of data. I can give you a specific case of we had a failure due to a corruption. It was a kind of a bad application programming design. But at the end of the day, to restore this 3.5 gigabyte file would have taken, using an old methodology on SSD, even a fast IOPS SSD was going to take about 14 hours just to copy that data over. With our methodology that we use, coupled with the AWS backend structure, we can swap volumes back into place and then just repoint back to the S3 objects, which are redundant. And that restore was done in about 35 seconds. So it's a big difference when you start doing like Mike's describing, where you abstract those things and you create this separation of all of these tasks. It fundamentally changes everything that you do in terms of, how do you deal with point in time storage? How do you deal with these large number of assets? Again, a 500 megabyte database, who cares? That solution is going to work just fine that way. But when you start getting this big number and it's wanting additional functionality and having such a massive investment in your digital assets, this is where this stuff really starts to shine, and from a cost and performance as well as a backup feature. So to directly answer the question, how do you optimize it? You can't. It is what it is in FileMaker. You run your backup, you tell it to do its thing, and it does what it does. The trick is, how do you bring that stuff back online when you do have an issue with it? So hopefully that will help a little bit. They're just in two entirely different things.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer, that it's, as you mentioned earlier, it's the difference between object store and block store, that
Yep.
it's because it's objects, it's just kind of a different animal. I wanted then to follow up, going down the object store path point of view or understanding that you provided here. Is AWS backend automatically handles some sort of versioning, I'd imagine, like if an object every time you modify an object through whatever transformation, it will take note of that?
Yeah, Mike's gonna probably pull that up here real quick because I know where his head is and I know how he thinks. He's just gonna show you this because it's a really interesting feature.
It's not on by default, but it's easy enough to enable if you
So
go
that's kind of a
into,
built-in audit log. If you know, if something goes wrong, and it's fundamentally different than the I think it was FileMaker 12 or 13 when Oleg rolled out the whole managed container thing.
Yeah.
So this is just like you said, completely, it's a different animal with different
Yeah.
rules.
And all of that, you kind of get it for free in your FileMaker app if you design your UI to work and integrate in with S3. So you flip it on at the bucket level and you say, okay, well, you could, when you query to go get an object, you can ask for the different versions of it. And you can turn that on and say, well, I'm going to keep 3 or whatever. There's so many permutations, but whatever your rules are, then you can query to get those ones. And you can do things like, hey, this third one that I have here, actually, I want to roll this forward now and make it that one. And you could write into the API to get that in there. So you kind of get versioning it for free, so to speak, in terms of programmatically. You've just got to layer the front end on it once you have the AWS pieces in place.
Yeah, still some work to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this demo doesn't really show it, but it'd be in it, you know, you could handle that.
Do you have implementations, client stuff that does that?
We have a lot of different buckets that have, you know, in different environments that utilize that methodology. I'm not aware of one we're doing in FileMaker because, quite honestly, when we get to this level of a solution, we're probably not using FileMaker. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of users, you know. So, but that concept of versioning is implemented in a whole bunch of different places. And again, it's really just saying, instead of giving me just this version, the most recent one, I want you to give me these other 3 in your return. You know, the last 3 or all of them that are versionized there. And it just comes back in a JSON object, just like that machine learning does. And you just parse it and display it for them.
Terrific.
Then if we're done with that topic, I'll ask any other questions on that before I move on. Silence is acceptance. There was a Heidi Porter brought up an interesting comment when we were referring to the security configuration of S3, and she points out that it's one of the most prone to user security issues and hacks due to faulty config. I can't agree with that more. You know, when you go to a level of you know, S3 and you realize that that's a bucket that's sitting out there, you've got to control risk to exposure of not only, you know, exposing it to the outside world, but you've got layers of software, firewalls, you've got security rules, security groups, you've got, you know, those firewall rules that are in place. You've also got bucket configurations too. One of the things we really like about it is, by default, when we enable a bucket, we just don't turn it on to the outside world. So it doesn't matter if you have an exact URL, you're just not getting to it. I mean, there's no port open to it. And then on top of that, we can encrypt it at rest in S3. And then on top of that, you know, we can apply individualized rules based on systematic processes. So for example, you know, we have a set of people who are allowed to add objects, but not change them. They can just add new ones. So they can grab an object, make whatever modifications, put it back up, and they're allowed to put a new one, but they can't modify it. Then you have another set of users through a different set of security rules and calls that they make in the configuration integrating with AWS. We allow them to make modifications, except on certain ones that are flagged a certain way. A good example might be a lawyer firm who, for a period of a trial and some period afterwards, every version of it must be kept. And you can make multiple different versions, but you can never get rid of the original ones. So, you know, you can have people do it, but they can never delete some of those previous ones. So you can set up some pretty dramatic rules, you know, for a variety of different business processes to match up with that. And again, you kind of just throw that over the fence and you turn it on and enable it in the S3. So, you know, referring back to that concept of having the infrastructure at your beck and call, it's really important to not think of your FileMaker solution, or really, quite honestly, any solution, as just the front end to it and what it does. You now have access to all of these other layers that if you integrate with them and you've got the infrastructure to support it, you can really take advantage of a lot of that stuff and not have to do a lot of the heavy lifting in your particular, you know, solution and handle all of that. You just rely on that decoupled component to handle all that heavy lifting for you. But good point, Heidi, that you really do have to watch the security there. And you're right, that big issue, I guess it was probably about 5 years ago where there was an S3 issue. It was all because someone put a period or comma in the wrong place. And they got into a bit of an issue there. But for individual solutions, you're right. You need to know what you're doing on the AWS side. You need to know your security rules, and then obviously follow them logically with your calls in FileMaker. Hopefully that underscores it. It really is important. I don't have any other questions. Does anybody have anything that's come up since then that kind of gelled in your head that we can answer? I'd be more than happy to talk in a few more minutes here.
I just threw something into the chat, which is that if you use conventional external storage of container fields and you want to do anything with it, you can use get container attributes and get file size or what have you. You sort of set up, it's not an unstored calculation, but it sort of behaves as one. And so that it's not a dog performance wise, it'll actually dump all that into the cache. And if you do something crazy like a base64 encoded version of it, maybe you want to make a light table view of your assets or something inside of FileMaker, then your cache will become gigantic. And if you throw it away to fix something else, it's going to have to regenerate all that next time you fire up. It'll be a nightmare. You bring up a really good point, Chris, that you start pulling all of those things in and thinking about, hey, I'm accessing this record, and I get, the canonical example of somebody saying, why is my solution slow? Well, because you've got a found set of 1 million records in a list view. Probably not a good idea. It's the same concept where you start loading all those things into memory, you're going to have an issue. Draco's going to have an issue. It brings things to a halt. Where if you offload these things to another area, you're just relying on that engine to deliver it to that front end. Again, that could be a web viewer, JavaScript, it could be a third-party app or whatever it may be. But either way, it's going to really reduce the overhead load of both your application and the overhead load that it's going to have impacting other users using your solution. Yeah, you can unwittingly cause yourself a lot of pain. You and whoever supports it, right? Yes.
Well, the truth is that as developers, we need to know a lot of different ways to do things and pick the one that's most efficient for that particular use case.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of those scenarios where, you don't want to throw the container functionality of FileMaker under the bus. It's fine for those situations that you've got scale in mind and you don't have these massive amount of objects. You start thinking about backups, time to restore, start thinking about the overhead that the application uses. Decouple when it makes sense. Don't decouple when it doesn't. I guess a good analogy might be, we've all heard of the separation model, right? In FileMaker, if you're this model, people can, it doesn't mean it's the best or worst or the only way to use. I think you use it in the cases where it makes sense and you don't use it in cases where it doesn't make sense. Don't complexify things if you don't need to. This is a good example of it. You don't need to go down this path every time, and the different implementations will make it more difficult. But it's nice to know that you can take a couple million row record database in FileMaker that has a couple million or 2 or 3 or 10 terabytes of data, and you can still manage the textual management of that in FileMaker, but throw the heavy lifting of picking up, going to disk, indexing, storing, retrieving, delivering, completely remove it out of the Draco engine and use it when you want. So my takeaway is I can continue to use FileMaker where it makes sense, and if my solution grows or my needs grow in a way, I've got this extremely large data store that I can really use to shore up that application. It gives me some sense that, I can open it and use FileMaker container objects with a lot of trust that I can go forward with it and know that I can scale as I need to.
While you're on that subject, would super container be a good thing where you just put your data store in S3? Would that be a solution?
I mean, you could do that, but you're going to use all the super container functionality to retrieve and get it back, and thus you're engaging that as opposed to just saying, well, listen, I'm just going to use the S3 direct API calls.
Oh, okay. I see.
I mean, why would you want that overhead if you didn't have to have it? And honestly, you probably, I shouldn't say it. I feel like you would reduce your functionality because you'd always have to go through that layer. I mean, I guess you could say use it when it makes sense and don't use it when it doesn't make sense because it's a little less heavy lifting or maybe there's some functionality. But if you're already writing that one other piece, then you've got all the hard pieces out of the way. Like, what's my API call? What's my curl call? What's the objects changes that I need to make in my calls? Once you do it the first time, it's just syntax after that. So I don't think we were trying really hard to get away from having to use plugins. I mean, if you, it's a tough thing to support, server-side infrastructure wise. And if you can get around it, it's always a good thing to try to avoid that. And I don't think it's any big secret. I mean, FileMaker's trying to, eliminate that as much as possible, going to some other options, as opposed to individualized plugins.
Sure.
Hey, on the topic, I'm glad Chris brought up the get container attributes function. I was thinking about it earlier because you're switching from containers to a web viewer here. I would imagine that AWS would give you the ability to replicate all of the results that you would traditionally get from get container attribute. We use it most often with auto enter to get all the, the width, the height being the most popular things that we'll get out of an image. But I'd imagine AWS would give you the ability to return the width and the height of a PDF or an image. Would I be wrong about that?
Mike, you know the specifics on those, but I'll make a comment on top of that after you answer that. Do you know specifically, without getting into some of the AI stuff?
I don't think it gives you specifically like, out of the box with S3, but you could definitely hit some other functionality, whether it's like a Lambda function that goes out and you pass it in the object name where it does that and hands it back to you.
The other thing that you could keep in mind, if they were lighter weight things, it seems kind of silly, but I mean, if it were a lightweight thing, you just pull it into a container object that's a local store thing. If it's not something large, like, oh, I need to pull in 100 gigabyte file, but if you PDF or whatever, just suck it into a container field, interrogate that container field, kill it, and display the data. It'd be an easy way to get that. Yeah. But even more important to that, and Mike alluded to it, is once it's in S3, I don't know for sure, but don't you have a recognition thing built into this? I know we did in the other one for the photographs.
Yeah.
So here's an example.
Yeah, Jason Wood had an interesting point in the comments about using Lambda functions too.
Yep. Yeah. That's exactly where I was heading. I see that now. But here's an example of, we'll go ahead and explain it, Mike.
Some recognition gives me a couple different actions that I can perform, like the data that I'm expecting back when I detect text. Some interesting, like detect faces or recognize celebrities, depending on the information that you're wanting to get back on it. Then it goes out and I'm referencing it directly from the object in S3. So I just pass it the key path for where it's at, and I get back, some JSON to go through. I get like a ton of data. It even shows me like the location of where it detected like that bit of information out of it. So the other comment was this Lambda function to extract EXIF data. I mean, Lambda comes into play a lot, especially, we've got a lot of our CNA apps now that are, based on serverless architecture, if you're not familiar with what Lambda is. But at the end of the day, making a call to Lambda to go and interrogate an object in an S3 bucket, as well as many other types of stored, and it is specific references DynamoDB. We use DynamoDB especially a lot for object-based, things, containers, movies, pictures, and graphic things. But you can extract a lot of data through that function. You can interact with Lambda to go and retrieve information and interrogate it. There's a lot of different services that kind of overlap in different areas. And I'm not going to pretend that Lambda is going to be like a sort of standard typical FileMaker person's wheelhouse, but there are people that do have some experience in it. But there are lots of other services that you can call as well. But if you're advanced enough to understand this, you can certainly get a lot of data returned to you, and you can even post-process. There's a lot you can do with Lambda. But outside of that, if you're looking about interrogating an object, recognition's a good one. There's a couple other ones out there.
that will make a pretty simple way without having to put some extra infrastructure behind it to do it. You kind of just have the bucket and you go directly at it.
Cool. We need to move on to HOnza.
Yep.
We have another presentation waiting in the wings. And
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great summer, everyone.
hey, Bill and Mike, thanks so much.
You bet.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Yeah. We'll be sending out a notice later this afternoon for a link to this video. Well, I mean, the next couple of days we'll get a notice out. But before we hang up here, I'm going to put a link in the chat for our YouTube page. We have a YouTube library, so you can catch previous ones, and then the new ones as they arrive will be there. So now, next up, we've got HOnza Kudelka. Am I pronouncing that correctly, HOnza?
Almost, but I don't care too much. Correct is Kudelka, but that's fine.
Kudelka. Okay. So you're with 24U, and I've seen some other presentations by you. You do a lot of stuff with optimization, and you really stretch the limits of tweaking FileMaker, and I've always appreciated that. So today you are going to talk to us about a solution that you put together. So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself? And you come at a disadvantage because we all started in the conversation earlier on. We were talking about something good that's happened to us in the last month, and then also what our claim to fame is. So why don't you start off with that? So give us one good thing that happened to you in the last 30 days, and then talk about yourself, and you can have your presentation.
Well, without being prepared, it's hard to think about something specific. My life for the last year, not just a few days, is extremely quick. I don't know if it has something to do with the COVID or something else, or me getting older and perceiving time a little bit differently, but I try to enjoy every piece of my life, and as a significant part of it is FileMaker. And because one of my roles in 24U is actually a management role, which doesn't give me too much time for development. So I actually spend time with FileMaker mostly in my free time these days. And this is also where the example that I will be talking about came from. When trying to think about the last 30 days, it may sound sad that it's one of the best things that happened to me within the last 30 days, but I got my first COVID vaccine shot. So
that's a common answer. That's the number one answer that we get when we ask it. So yeah.
So I'm happy to have one behind me, one ahead of me next month, and that shows me a little bit of light in the end of the tunnel in which we are right now. So
okay.
Hopefully we will have more personal meetings and not virtual ones as we have now. But on the other side, one of the good things is that I have a chance to meet you in Kentucky without leaving my home in Prague. So
that's good.
So that's also a good thing.
Well, you made a comment that piqued my interest. You said that you are mostly in management and you don't get a chance to do any much in the way of serious development with the FileMaker anymore. So that leads me to think of the question: is FileMaker more fun when it's a job or when it's a hobby?
I think it's hard to differentiate because at least to me, things become fun when I become successful. So when I reach goals, when I resolve puzzles, whatever, and that's something that always has to happen in business as well. So I think there's no real difference. The only difference is when I do it in free time. I don't care how many users will need it, how much value it will generate. I just do what I like to do. When it comes to business, I have to care about the return of investment and what customers will pay for and what will make sense economically.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you put together a cool tool that Alan was telling me about. So why don't you tell us about it?
Okay, well, I shall probably start sharing my screen now. So let me
Is it working
do
for you?
that. So it should be working now.
There we are. Yep.
Just certain the controls. So now you should see my screen here. So this is an example that I built last summer, and it was one of the things that basically come to my from my hobbies, which is making things that appear or seem impossible. So that's always a challenge when someone comes to me and says this is not possible to do in FileMaker. That's the easiest way how to get me started and to work till late night to break that challenge and do prove that it's actually possible. So what I built here is simply solution that generates barcodes. I can just quickly show different kinds of barcodes, including coda bar. This is something I will show later. Then I have some 2D codes such as STAC, data metrics, PDF 417, or the most popular QR code as well. The nice thing about it that everyone likes is that this is all based on just custom functions. So there is nothing external, no JavaScript, no plugins, no web services. It's purely just custom functions. So when I hit that button here, generate, it just calls a script based on what code I have chosen. In this case, it's QR code, and it just does a set field. And in that set field, I just take the parameters and pass them to my custom function. And that's how I generate the barcode. And another cool thing about it is that it's a PDF. So if you have ever used a QR code generator, you have probably seen those tiny white lines between individual pixels, which I personally dislike. So what I generated here in the PDF is a barcode that's basically in the structure of the PDF is a single graphical object. So if you scale it to whatever size, it still looks nice. The only disadvantage which I have unfortunately discovered after releasing this example, because I only rarely work with Windows, is that it doesn't work in Windows until you make the container field interactive, because to my surprise, even with FileMaker 19, FileMaker still doesn't support PDF in container fields. So this is the cool thing about it, and for people who like to use barcodes or need to use barcodes and like to be independent on plugins, or and this is another benefit of the calculation approach, who want to use it in WebDirect or in server-side scripts to generate barcodes into container fields in batches. This is a solution that's completely independent on external technology. So you can just copy the custom functions, paste them into your solution, and it works. But let me tell you more about it, which I didn't share too much or in much detail, where it came from. So it all started with me needing to generate links in PDFs that come from FileMaker. So I basically had a report that I generated from FileMaker, and I wanted that report to contain a link which you can click and it takes you to a web page. Very simple, but not natively supported by FileMaker. I got the idea that if I use a very small PDF which has the link inside it, and I put that PDF in a container field, it might work. So I tried it, and it was a great disaster that I spent like the whole day trying to implement this approach. I even generated, here I started with a PDF with only link. So this is just a blank PDF with nothing in it, but it contains a link that takes you to a web page. And I tried to put that PDF into the report in FileMaker and tried to generate the PDF, and it worked until I discovered that it didn't work, because the only thing was that because in the report I actually had an actual URL printed in the readable form. Preview and even Acrobat Reader recognized that URL and automatically made it clickable for me without that actually being a link in the PDF. Only when I tried to implement it in a real solution where I needed normal text to appear as a link, and it didn't work, I discovered that this was a misconception, that I didn't know that it actually didn't work. And that made me start studying, because another of my natures is that I don't like to give up. So I have already spent like a day and a half with this, and it was too far for me to give up. So I was looking for a different solution. And I discovered that the only solution really in FileMaker is, after you create a PDF, you have to somehow modify the PDF to add those links into it. So what I ended up studying is this, and thanks to PDF becoming an open source technology, I think based on this, it was maybe 2008 or earlier, I started studying this specification, which actually, as you can see here, has like 748 pages. So it's quite a lot of information to read, but it's, you know, I don't give up. So it didn't scare me too much. And I started learning what the PDF format looks like inside. And actually, this file is an example that I created manually using just a BBEdit and hexadecimal editor. So here, if I just open this file with BBEdit, you will see that this is pretty readable file mostly, and it's a clear structure, out of which the most difficult part is this, which tells the PDF reader, whatever it is, where individual objects of the PDF are. And then the rest is just a lot of specifically formatted text objects which tell the PDF reader what to do with it, out of which the most important for the link here is the annotation one, which is recognized by that it's type of annotation, and it tells the PDF reader that at these coordinates there is a link which leads to another object, number 6, which is this URL. So this is the technical aspect of having a link, but this started a lot of thinking in my head, and I said to myself, well, if I can do this, I can do more. So I started reading through the PDF specification, and very soon, like within 2 or 3 weeks, I came up with another example where I actually could generate PDF with a lot of graphics in it, because I discovered that it's just a series of commands like draw a line, draw a rectangle, and so on. So I started creating this example, and I built this drawing thing where I can just delete this and recreate it with a script. And if I show you what the script looks like, again, it's just a series of custom functions. So draw example, and you see here that I am drawing rectangle, drawing another rectangle, drawing a sphere, and so on. So I built this another drawing tool for creating PDFs, out of which, just out of curiosity, the most difficult part was drawing text in PDF. I could speak hours about how text is drawn in PDF, and I actually spent maybe 50 hours learning how to do it. But in the end, I ended up with, like, you can see here, 86 custom functions. So this has become pretty huge already, and as you can see, almost half of the functions are related to handling fonts. But I didn't want to give up with fonts, because I knew at that moment, or I had that idea in my head, that the next thing I had to do will be barcodes. And I had few reasons for it. One of the reasons was the barcode creator, because I had a customer who used it, and he was looking for something that would be faster, but he also refused to use plugins. So and he didn't want to use web services. So that was exactly kind of challenge that I like. Something that seems like impossible, right? If you want to be plugin independent, you get barcode creator. If you want to be fast, you get a plugin or web service. So I challenged myself and tried to make something that would be faster than barcode creator, independent on plugins, easy to implement, independent on web services, so it works offline, even on iPhone. And I also wanted to generate better barcodes, like you saw the vertical graphics that looks nicer than those that most QR code generators create. So I started creating this solution, and I actually started with the simple one. So when you check the easiest one, the core of the linear barcodes is simply just a series of bars which are either narrow or wide, black or white. So this is what this raw one ID generates, where it interprets the numbers here simply as this is a width of 1 black, and it alternates black and white. So the second one is white, it's white. The width is 2 units. The third one is 3 units wide. Fourth one is 4 units wide, and so on. This is actually very useful if you want to generate a 1D barcode that doesn't conform to any of the existing standards, or it's a less known standard, because as long as you can measure the barcode which you want to recreate, you can generate it here. And this function was the starting point. It's very simple. So when you check the 1D code here, the raw, yeah, here it is. So it's just a very short function where in a loop, for which I am using the while function here. I simply generate a code stream and using another function here. So PDF barcode stream, that's the one that actually generates the contents of the PDF. And then this PDF from JSON function, this is a function that I inherited from the previous example from the drawing one. So if I check the function here, the PDF stream, let me just find it. PDF sets stream. No, this is for the PDF. Sorry, 1D code for here PDF barcode stream. So it looks like a very simple function where it really just goes in a loop through the input and it generates the comments for the PDF stream, which will draw black or white black rectangles represented by the RE command, or simply space which represents the white part, because it also generates barcodes with transparent background. So this way it simply draws just the black bars and nothing between them. So this was a start, and then what I started doing was simply going through the Wikipedia and looking for the different kinds of barcodes. I simply used the FileMaker help to check what barcodes are supported by FileMaker Go, and my intention originally was the same as the barcode creator one. Simply create a generator that will generate all barcodes which are supported by FileMaker Go for reading. So I was going through the Wikipedia for the barcode specifications, and here for each barcode in the example you have links to the resources which I was using to learn how to implement that barcode. And when I ended up having all the 1D codes, which was about 2 weeks challenge, it was not too difficult because they are pretty straightforward. And the most difficult thing there is just calculating checksum in the code, which some codes have defined by the standard. And the other relatively difficult part is encoding characters, because there is a lot of like bit alignment. If, for instance, I want to type some text here, like "Hello, Kentucky," obviously I need to use a barcode that supports non-numeric characters such as code 128. And if I check the code inside the custom function for code 128, you will see here that there is a sequence of codes. Each code represents the width of the individual bars. And then there is another part here which differentiates, which sets rules for encoding the individual characters, because there is a difference how you can encode ASCII characters, how you can encode numeric characters, numbers, digits, and special characters as well. So this was pretty straightforward, but it required a little bit of concentration, especially dealing with the while function. And if you struggle working with while function, you might want to check Matt Petrovsky's video about debugging while functions and any complex functions. Basically, the rule is that you can use, I think I have it somewhere here, it's just commented out, but maybe in other functions. Basically, in the function, you add local variables which you name debug or log or something like that. And when you evaluate this custom function in data viewer, you then check the debug local variable to see what was happening in the individual stages of the custom function, the calculation or the while loop. So this was pretty simple stuff. Now I started checking the 2D codes, such as stack code, which I can show you what it looks like here. If I encode the hello Kentucky, I will just select a stack and generate it here. So this is what a stack code looks like, and if I recall correctly, this is one of the oldest 2-dimensional codes. What most 2-dimensional codes have in common is that they incorporate what is called self-correction codes to allow some level of damage to the code without losing its readability. And this becomes mathematically complicated. Most of the self-correcting codes are based on finite field mathematics, which when I was in university, I probably knew what it was. I completely forgot, so I had to relearn at least the basics. But I didn't bother learning it completely. I just found good examples, and some of them were in JavaScript, some of them were in PHP, and I simply ported the code from PHP and JavaScript into FileMaker calculations. So this is the core of the most CPU intensive part of generating any 2D code, where basically you take the data, encode it in some way into bits or bytes, and then you have to add additional bits and bytes which are calculated from the main data in a way that if you lose about 30% of the resulting stream, you can apply calculations to recover the data without having everything. So I don't want to go too deep into this, but the key point here is it's a very difficult math in terms of processing power. FileMaker calculation engine is not ideal for it, and it requires completely working with operations such as bitwise XOR or shifting bits in bytes and so on. So I had to use functions like converting decimal to binary or hexadecimal and so on. And because calculation engine is not ideal for it, it also was challenging to make it fast. So when I finally made my first stack code working here, I will show you, this was the first version where it actually encoded a valid stack code. So let me try to encode the hello Kentucky here. I'll click generate, and you can see how long it takes. And it's just a simple text. You can put I think up to 8 kilobytes of text into stack code. So as you recall, probably one of my challenges was to make it faster than barcode grader. So and because one of the things that I do is optimizations, so I added some benchmarking into this. I can show you in the custom function how I did it. So in the barcode, in the function to generate the stack code, I started here by collecting the exact timestamp. I've used the plugin to to collect the timestamp with microsecond precision. And in the end, I measured how long it took me to calculate all this. And I also put some benchmark points inside the code to find out which part of the code was the slowest one. So when I try to generate this barcode again, here in the data viewer, you can see that it took me 2 seconds and a little bit to generate the barcode. And out of the 2 seconds and 100 milliseconds, whole 2 seconds were just calculating the read-Solomon self-correction code. So let me show you what I ended up with after I optimized the code by applying the same principles forever, finding the bottleneck, changing the calculation, making it faster. So this is the final version that's available now. And when I generate the same code here, I get it in 382 milliseconds. So this optimization itself was worked for, I think, 2 weekends. But I was very happy to achieve this result. And I learned a lot about functions and calculation engine. One of the things is that it was very, it basically needed I needed to use the set recursion function because there is a lot of iterations of the while loop. So if I try this not optimized version and try to encode 2 long tags here, it will simply show the spinning wheel and then it will fail. So in the final version, if you check the custom function here, you will see that in every barcode generation function for the 2D codes, so it's up here, I start with the set recursion function, and I set the limit to relatively a high number, 5 million here. Because if you want to encode a lot of text, it will take a lot of time even after the optimizations. But what I learned here is in this function, in the calculations, almost everything matters. And for instance, here, I have these pre-calculated tables of read-Solomon generation codes. And one discovery here was that actually using choose function with multiple parameters was faster than using return delimited text and the get value function, but only with less than, I think, about 16 or 20 parameters. When I use more than that, using this return delimited values and using the get value became faster. And also I discovered that choose function can, or probably any function, can only accept certain amount of parameters. I think like 128 or something like that. And if you try to put more parameters there, it will not be a valid function. And I also had to split these tables into multiple custom functions because FileMaker custom function will only take 30,000 characters. So that's why the whole solution here is 120 custom functions. It could have been less if FileMaker accepted more than 30,000 characters in the calculation. Another thing I want to mention here with regards to optimization of the speed of the calculation, and I think it's in the read-Solomon code, is that maybe in the polynomial functions here. Basically, if you have a while function and to make the code readable, you use like partial results and multiple variables. Every single variable that you assign value to adds relatively, especially if it's a loop that runs 10,000 times, every single variable adds an overhead, which if you can avoid by having less local variables in the while function, will count as a significant difference when you multiply it by that high number. So I also, as part of the optimization, had to minimize the number of partial results and variables used in the while functions, which made the code a little bit less readable, but the speed, the performance gain was significant. So this is quite a nice discovery. Another nice discovery is that when you deal with JSON and you use JSON as a plain array, which I use sometimes here, it may be much faster than dealing with text string with return separated values. But when you start building a structure with JSON where you have multiple levels and named nodes and things like that, it can become much slower, and the time needed to calculate the JSON starts expanding very fast. So this is a little bit background about how I made this fast and how I created the functions. And maybe just before I let you ask questions, one more thing I wanted to show you here is, for instance, if I turn on my iPhone to share a screen here, I can show you that I actually made this, optimized this for iPhone as well. And I use the scanning function in FileMaker Go to scan the code. It doesn't respond to my clicks, to my taps for some reason. This is weird. Let's try again. Okay, so now it's scanning. So let me scan the stack code here, and now as you can see, I have a QR code selected here. You can scan this QR code with your own phones, and you will see that it's actually generated the same code here. And you could see that it was almost instant. So even on my iPhone, it takes just less than a second. I can put much longer text here, such as something from the chat. If I manage to open the chat here. So someone mentioned me. I don't have time to read it, but I can copy it here and generate the QR code or ASTAC code from it. You see that it's a longer text, so it will already take some time to generate, but it still should be reasonable considering that it's based on custom functions. Okay, so here it is. Prior to the optimizations, this would actually take probably 2 or 3 minutes to generate. So now when I try to scan this with the app. Will it take it? Yes. So now it had a hard time scanning it properly. So I will just simplify it a little bit. Still pretty complex code. And again, very quickly, I have a generated QR code here. One thing that I have prepared, and I will be glad if you let me know how I did with this presentation, is this link to a quick feedback form. So feel free to scan it and fill in the form. And now I'm open to any questions. So shoot at me and ask whatever you want.
Hey, Honza, did you consider, when I've thought about barcodes in the past, and I was thinking SVG would be a nice solution. Did you consider that as a possibility?
Yes, I did. Actually, about 90% of this code is about encoding the data and calculating the read Solomon correction codes, and about 10% is rendering the code in some language. So I have chosen the PDF language because I can display PDF straight in the container field and work with it immediately.
Okay.
To display SVG, I would have to use a web viewer. I am not a fan of web viewer if I can avoid it, because it's hard to have 100% control over it. I would love to see support for SVG natively in container fields, and I hope we are going to get it within the next 5 years. But as I mentioned, once I have the data to render, whether I make rectangles in PDF or squares in PDF or in SVG, it doesn't really matter. One person, or maybe more than one person, asked, especially because of the Windows and lack of support for PDF on Windows, whether I could make it to generate PNG as well. So I started looking into it, and you're first to hear that, everyone here. I started working on it, and I'm going to create it. But that's another challenge, because to generate a valid PNG, I will have to port the zlib deflate algorithm into the calculation engine as well.
Okay. Is the syntax similar across all these graphics formats? I mean, is similar in complexity?
In complexity, yes. Similar, not at all.
Right.
I think it should be very easy to show you if I export this barcode into the folder here. I can just open it in PDF. The beauty of PDF is that it can be compressed, but doesn't have to be. So this is the syntax of the stream that actually draws the barcode. So basically, here I have set the color space. I think this is also to do something with the drawing environment, and then it's just a series of rectangles. So these are coordinates. This is width and height, and this tells the engine to create a rectangle, and so on. Else are lines. I don't recall exactly every command, so I have a quick reference to know what to use. But in the drawing example, I have created wrapper custom functions for this. So especially for the PDF stream, it's very simple to just go to this example and grab the custom functions, and it's all there. So here is setting up some parameters, and to draw something, you have draw line. You see this, it's just about like using the few coordinates, and that's it. Draw line, draw rectangle. The most difficult was, but it was still just a simple math from the basic school. Drawing oval or circle, where you actually have, because PDF doesn't have a native support for circles or ovals, you just have Bezier curves. So you have to build it out of Bezier curves. That's it.
Fun. Yeah, I don't know if anybody knows that PDF is actually a special case of EPS, the encapsulated PostScript, which is a special
Yes.
case of PostScript. So all of
Exactly.
this got its foundation back in the 70s and 80s that created the desktop publishing revolution. PDF actually has its roots in, with John Warnock and his PostScript language that changed the world back in the 80s. So the syntax of the description of a line in a box and various graphics is
Yes.
all PostScript.
Yes, exactly. It's all PostScript, and for those of you who would like to learn that syntax, this example also has this tool where you can actually add raw PDF stream commands into it, and then it will just render them. And thanks to Christian to mention that if you want to have a plugin-based solution, one of the most feature-rich plugins for working with PDF, thanks to the Dyna PDF library, is his MBS plugin. So
yeah, it works nice.
So yeah,
Christian did just join us recently.
For me, this is mostly fun, and as I mentioned, I like challenges, like something being said to be impossible, and I'm glad that I made it work this way, and actually really faster even than the barcode creator.
Very good. Does any more questions?
Yeah, I have a question. First off, very impressive. I very much like that you're doing a PDF, which is vector. And I assume it's all vector. That all said, there's an interesting point that I first saw in a beeswax blog, which also pertains to the glyphs, the SVGs, that even if you have a vector image as opposed to a rasterized bitmapped image, you can still get a bit of an optimization if you're very careful specifying the size, the width, and the height, such that the vector image is kind of matches well with the output device. So long story preamble to the question. When you're generating these PDFs, essentially barcodes in the form of a PDF, do you have the ability built in this very impressive architecture to specify the width and or the height?
Yes, definitely. It's here in the settings. So here you specify the width. The basic unit used by PDF is printing points, which is 1/7. I don't know how to say it in English. So you have 72 points in inch. So 1 point is the unit, and you can use fractional numbers like 1.5, etc. So yes, you can specify the width of the unit and size of the barcode. The main advantage is getting it rendered nicely depending on what engine is actually used to render it, because in principle it should not matter. but most engines, most drawing engines which are rendering PDF are somehow simplified, and specifically FileMaker. I don't know if it's FileMaker or macOS, but it seems to be rendering the PDF by mapping points to pixels. So if you have a PDF which is 1 by 1 point in size, it will try to render it into a single pixel, and it will be disaster when you try to scale it. But if you make the PDF 1,000 points wide, 1,000 points high, with exactly the same structure, it will initially render it 1,000 by 1,000 pixels and downsize it to whatever size you want to use. You want to draw it. So you can affect how it's drawn by specifying the size, but other than having the page size of the PDF different, the whole rest of the content will be the same.
All right, so it's interesting. It's like a two-step process. First, you render the PDF using, the technique that you described, and then because we do a bunch of this barcode stuff, and then, for the output, you would look at the document that you're outputting. You'd look at the size of the barcode that you want, and you'd try and get them lined up so that you get it to print as crisp as possible, depending on whether you're printing on a 600 DPI, PPI printer, or whether you're printing to one of those printers that begins with the letter Z. But anyway, I'm gonna have to look at this. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very
Hansa,
nice, Hansa.
a question, please, sir. Is this file available for download and/or commercial licensing?
Yes, it's available for download. The link is simply for usw.com/PDF barcodes, or you can just go to our website. So if you go to foryoursoftware.com, under news, you can simply search for examples, and all of them are there. They are the way you unlock it to get full access is that, and this is actually also a bonus feature of all these examples, is by subscribing to our mailing list, and then you get the full code of the example, and you can do whatever you want with it. I would just appreciate that if you use it, you keep the comments and copyright notice inside the custom functions. So here, by clicking this button, you get full access, and that's it. And as I mentioned, it's a bonus. There is a very not so simple, but not too difficult script, which actually signs you up for the mailing list, and if it succeeds, it sets the password of the full access account to the persistent ID of that FileMaker installation. So if you unlock it and copy it to someone else, that person will also be asked to subscribe to the mailing list to unlock it. Feel free to copy this technique to your code as well. But I will appreciate if you then stay in the mailing list, because you will benefit from it more than I do. I'm trying to send out emails which are full of examples, content, tips, and highly technical stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like you don't have to twist our arm for that. You supply lots of cool stuff. Yeah. Hansa, that's awesome. And it's so generous of you to provide that for free. That's nice. So what time is it over there? You're it's getting towards bedtime for you, isn't it?
Almost. It's 9 in the evening here.
Yeah. Well,
Not so bad.
appreciate you spending time with us today. That's awesome.
It's my pleasure.
So we'll have you back to talk about something else in the future. We had a good sized group today, and we hope to. I think next month we're going to have something special. Yeah, but we'll anybody who wants email me back channel, and I'll make sure that if you haven't gotten on our mailing list. I don't think I put you on there, HOnza, yet. Do you want me to add you to our notification list as well?
Why not?
Okay. It only comes out once a month.
I just cannot guarantee that I will be able to make it every time.
Oh, no. We've got 150 people on the list, and we get 20 or 30 each week. So that you'd be in good company. It's not a problem. But at least then you'll know what we're doing. So anyway, so happy May to everybody, and we'll see y'all next month. Make sure you mark your calendar, 4th Tuesday of the month, 12:30 Eastern Daylight Standard Time, depending upon the time of year.
Hey, Jonathan, not to put you on the spot, do you have your agenda for next meeting yet?
We're still working on that. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a special one. So I'm not at liberty to say exactly because it's not nailed down, but it should be good.
Shouldn't be the next one about a new FileMaker version?
Well, that could be. We'll see. I hear that they're in the wind that there is another version coming out soon. So we'll see. We might make that at least part of the presentation. So, but good. I appreciate everybody being here today. It's nice to see everybody. See old friends most every month, and you guys take care and. Make sure, I know I see Christian's picture there. Make sure you check out the MBS plugin. He's not a sponsor or anything like that, but I just use the heck out of that plugin. I really like it. So anyway, and the Dyna PDF works great. For those of you who need to render PDFs in a variety of ways. So anyway, just plug in a friend there. So catch you all next month, and will be next month is summer, so we'll have our first summer meeting.
Thank you, HOnza.
Yes, very much.
Yeah. I've used that plugin for now a couple months, and it's been phenomenal. Thank you.
Great. Well, I'm gonna check it out, definitely. So all righty, you guys take care.
Bye now. Thanks.